Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'm really glad you're here. My name is Becca, and this is Freyja, and this channel is all about my love for spinning, knitting, weaving, sewing, all the fiber things. I invite you to grab whatever it is you have on the go and join me. Let's make some stuff. This week has been really difficult for me and my family, and while spinning has been, as a meditative act, good for my mental health, um, my creative, generative part of my brain has really been tapped out. So I haven't felt like starting any new projects. But I did, however, have a large and growing pile of things that needed to be mended. You know, I wear when I make something, a knitted garment or a sewn garment, I wear them a lot. And so eventually they do get holes in them or split seams, or something happens that makes them not wearable in the moment, but certainly mendable. And, in our modern day, we're surrounded by an abundance of things. And, if our shirt or socks get a hole in them, it's really easy to just toss them out and get a new one. But when I've spent hours and weeks and months sometimes working on creating something, I feel much closer to it, and I want to make it useful for as long as it possibly can. And I won't lie. Sometimes things get to the point where they're no longer repairable. But even then, I don't toss them out. I retire them to the cedar chest where I can still enjoy them when I look at them and I have the memories. So mending is a restorative process. And this week I think that's a metaphor for how things are going right now. That I needed to take the time to sit and do some putting the pieces back together and repair. And I hope that you find this as restorative as Freyja and I have. In my basket, I have all the things that have been accumulating in the repair pile. I have a shirt where the sleeve seam has started coming unraveled, and so we'll be mending that. I have a sweater that has a hole under the armpit, and I have 6 pairs of socks that have all been worn in almost the same place. And I think the wool, felted wool slippers that I've been wearing have been a little bit rough on my socks. So I'll be mending those. There was another pair of socks that I am retiring. This heel needs a lot of repair, and I could tear it out and put on a new heel and give them some more life, and maybe I'll do that, but for now they're going in the cedar chest. I also have all the tools that I need to do the mending. So for the sewing, that means I have thread and a needle, some scissors, and the all-important thimble. What I'm stitching here, I have a linen shirt that I completely sewed by hand. And I've been sewing by machine for many years, but only in the past few years have I started getting into hand sewing. And so I'm still learning a lot. One of the things that I learned with this shirt is that linen fabric and silk thread don't really go together very well because they're both very slippery. Um, Another thing that I've been trying to figure out is when do I need to use backstitch and when can I do a running stitch, because the running stitch is so much faster than doing backstitch. But I've always been a little bit paranoid about the seams coming undone, and so I sort of defaulted to always using backstitch, which of course makes the work a lot longer. And I thought, well, maybe the sleeve seam, the long sleeve seam, wouldn't take as much stress as some of the other seams, so maybe I could get away with doing a running stitch. Or I think I did a running stitch, but it wasn't the entire seam because I used shorter lengths of thread. So, I have a hole about 6 inches long in the sleeve seam that I'm needing to repair. And so I felled the seams on the inside, and I didn't want to take those out and have to redo those as well. So what I'm doing here is just a catch stitch to repair the seam to bring it back together. And as I said, I'm learning, so I learned a lot from this, and the next time I make something with linen, I won't be using silk thread, and I'll be using backstitch when I need to. The light for stitching outside was really great, but it did start to get a little warm after a while, and so I decided to come in and finish up the rest of the darning. So I knew that to repair knitting, especially socks, you did something called darning, but I didn't know what darning was until a few years ago. So off to the internet I went to figure out what that was all about. And it turns out darning is actually really simple. Essentially what you're doing is making a woven patch to go over the worn area, or the hole if there's a hole, to reinforce and duplicate the stitches. And if you do it on the inside with the same yarn that the garment or object is made from, you can barely see it from the outside. Of course, if you wanted to have the patch be a decorative item or a design element, you can always do it on the outside with a contrasting color of yarn, and then you'll have a patch that's visible, which is fun. But most of the time I try to use the same yarn that I made the garment out of, and I do it on the inside to make them, the patches, almost invisible. To do darning, we have the tools for darning, so it requires a long, large darning needle. Sometimes these are blunt, most often they're blunt when you're using yarn, but they can be sharp as well. The key thing for choosing a darning needle is that the eye is large enough so that the yarn can fit through. We also have something called a darning egg or a darning mushroom that is used to go on the underside or inside of the knitted fabric to sort of stretch it a little bit and make it so that you can see what you're doing, but also catch the stitches a little easier. And to create that woven patch, you first start with vertical threads that you catch the existing stitches, and then you make the horizontal threads woven between those vertical threads that you just made to make the woven patch. And then you just weave in the ends, and it's done. Hello. One of the tools that's used is a darning egg or a darning mushroom. Sometimes these come on a with a handle. But I've had this collection of semi-precious stone eggs that I've had because I really like them. I like the weight of them. I like how they look. And as I was getting ready to, I learned about darning and how you do it. I was getting ready to buy a darning egg, and I thought, wait a minute, I have these egg-shaped objects. I wonder if they would work. And turns out it worked great. So I'm not necessarily recommending that you buy a stone egg rather than a wooden darning egg or a darning mushroom. But I had them on hand, and this was a way for them to become more than just pretty objects, but also useful ones. all in all, it took about 2.5 hours to do all of the mending. I hope that you found it as restorative as Freyja and I did. And there she goes. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for spending some of your creative time with me. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.